Yeah, I can never doubt myself, I know better. All of you critics be acting like you know better. Blowing the
Nathan
smoke.
Rogers here with MMAFutures. I'm joined today by the one and only Brian Dunn. In all honesty, man, you're kind of a legend in the sport here. Tell us a little bit, for those that don't know who you are, tell us about who you are and what role you play.
Okay, I work for the Nebraska State Athletic Commission. We regulate boxing and professional boxing and amateur and professional MMA throughout the state. My main job, I'll say, is to protect the state from liability. And what that means is, like, I make sure there's a doctor at every event. I make sure that there's an ambulance. I make sure that the promoter provides an insurance policy to protect the fighters in case they get hurt. I just, and all that stuff is in the rules, but I just make sure that it's there every time. I make sure the fighters have clean blood work for hepatitis B and C and HIV. I make sure they have a physical, so their heart's not going to explode. Maybe this guy just gets off the couch and wants to fight and has never trained and he's just not physically ready for it. Or sometimes we uncover problems they have, heart murmurs or whatnot, that they didn't know that could have caused a problem if they competed. Second to that, my real job is I'm a tax collector, right? I collect the tax from the sale of the tickets, and that's what funds my job, my office. We charge the promoters an extra 5% on top of the regular state tax, and that 5% is what, pays my salary.
And so is that a pretty standard thing from state to state as far as the way that the tax collection works and what the commission's role plays in the actual sport itself?
I believe so, yes. I think now the numbers might be a little different. We charge a 5% fee. Some states might charge more. Some states have a cap, which means, if we charge a broadcast tax, that can get expensive, because those guys if the UFC comes, they're making millions of dollars to air that, and we charge 5% of that. Okay. In Nebraska, we have no cap. I think a cap would be welcomed, as I think it might keep some big shows away. Like Nevada, if you pay $50,000, that's the max. Where here, it could be exponentially more than that.
Tell me about kind of like the difference in rule sets, especially on the amateur side from state to state. I think that a lot of people don't understand that, when fighters go from, say, Missouri to Nebraska to Minnesota to Florida, there's different things. Tell me kind of a little about the thought process and setting that up.
Okay.
And why there is not some sort of uniformity across states and things along those lines.
The problem there lies in each state being the regulator of their state. So here in Nebraska, we follow the unified rules because I believe that they're safe. Yes, fighting is dangerous inherently, but I think the rule set that they've come up with for professionals and amateurs is safe for competition. And that's my opinion, I'll say. So if you take a state, and sometimes other bureaucrats get involved. It's not just my decision, you know what I mean? But other bureaucrats get involved, and so let's say Missouri might say, okay, we think those rules are fine. However, I'd feel better if we added this, this, and this as more protection for the athletes, especially for the amateurs, which I understand, but I think it decimates the sport across the country.
Now, I've been to a lot of different states. I've seen a lot of different things. Nebraska I've seen as one of the most open states to, especially MMA. Not all combat sports there's a lot of things we'll get into a little bit later about different sports and things along those lines. But you guys allow pro amateur cards. You guys allow, I found out in Texas that they have to, if they have a pro am card, they have to have at least 6 pros on the card.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Florida is you have to pay a fee for an amateur card and a fee for a pro card. So to do a pro am card, you're getting taxed twice on it.
I see.
So kind of, where do you think the thought process comes in that? Does that kind of get into politics more when you start talking about those things? Or, where does that kind of things lie and where do those decisions
again,
made?
I don't know how the decision is made in other states. For me, I don't view any difference in why you would not allow to have professionals and amateurs on the same card. It doesn't make any, for boxing, we're forced at, the federal law says USA Boxing has to regulate amateurs. So if they want to do a pro-am boxing card, they're going to get stuck paying USA Boxing their part and me my part. But that's by federal law, nothing to do with Nebraska. Now for MMA, no, I think it's pro cards are expensive already, and the amateurs I think help fill that card so you can still get to see the pros, you know. And maybe that's just my opinion because I promoted myself as well, and I know the struggles that go along with that. It's not an easy job at all.
Right. So, at a fight, who is under the purview of the commission, and who is under you? You obviously have, there's probably things I'm not thinking of, but you have the judges. Those are paid by the state, correct?
Well, they're assigned by the state,
Okay.
paid by the promoter.
Okay. You have the referees that are part of the commission. You have your timekeepers that are part of the commission.
Yep.
What other people are there that are actually, maybe not necessarily paid by the commission, but overseen by the commission?
Sure. So I have my group of inspectors. They're my core guys. They'll check hand wraps for boxing. They'll do the paperwork, collect the license fees, that kind of thing. And it depends on the event, but I only have a small group. You know most of them. So those are my people. You could say the doctors, but I'm under the doctor's control. He's not under my control. You know what I mean? Then we license all the fighters, so they're subject to my control by their license. Same with the cornermen. So if a cornerman gets out of line, I can say, hey, you can get punished because you're licensed under me.
Okay.
The promoter, of course, is licensed under me, so I have a little bit of control over them.
I was actually having a conversation with somebody the other day, and it was one of those things I said, I have to talk to Brian about this. Talk about the decision to not let one fighter fight another fighter. I know this happens in boxing more than it does in MMA,
Sure.
where they say, I cannot sanction this fight.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that decision and kind of how you make those decisions. I know in MMA, especially on the amateur side, they can't have so many losses in a row and things along those lines to make sure that they're training in a safe position.
Absolutely.
But talk to me a little bit about how do you keep fighters safe and keep them safe from their own decisions?
Yeah, and you know what? It's honestly just opinion. I've denied fights, and then a promoter say, "Look, here's the facts. This is what and then I've changed my mind, and I've complained about fights, and then the wrong guy, the other guy won that I was worried about, and so it's a learning curve, I guess. And like I said, it's opinion based, so I can have my mind change. Now, there's some things I can't, like if a guy has just a flat out losing record, he just can't fight. But in a case by case, it's my opinion, and I try not to deny too many fights because I've been wrong. I'm not 100% right, and both fighters know what they're going in for. So if this guy thinks he can win, who am I to really say that he can't?
Right.
Unless the obvious is overwhelming.
Let's talk a little bit about the idea of being able to request you guys to look at footage to see if something was missed or something along those lines. I know typically those kinds of things don't get overturned. I know that in the state of Nebraska it's happened once or twice.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about that process and how that process works for those people that don't know.
Okay, so as a state agency, we want everything to be done properly, and even it's hard to make a decision at the moment. Whether the referee just saw it or I just saw a little bit of footage. So when someone does file an appeal, it goes to my boss. He's an attorney. He knows the rules in and out, and he'll review it. He'll talk to me. He'll talk to the person who filed the appeal. He'll talk to the referee. He'll talk to whoever was involved in that decision or reaction, whatever the case, and then he'll decide if it's warranted to be overturned. And in some cases, it happens. I mean, mistakes happen. Referees make mistakes. I make mistakes. Judges make mistakes. I mean, it happens. So, and I hate to see it happen. So, we'll deal with it the best we can.
Something that I find interesting is kind of the suspension process, especially for fighters that get knocked out, that are out cold from a submission, things along those lines. Do you guys have a standard rule set that you say somebody gets knocked out, they have to take 60 days off? Is there a standard rule set to that, or is that judged by the doctor? Or
in a lot of states, there's a standard rule set. Here in Nebraska, we leave it up to the doctor. The doctor knows better than me how long this guy, if he lost consciousness, he knows the damage that caused more so than me, and so of course we defer to the doctor. The only hard rule that we have is the technical submission loss, and I'll tell you where that came. Fighters were coming in completely untrained. getting choked unconscious. They didn't even know they were getting choked. And it became a problem. Like, it happened 3 times in a night. Guys would be asleep on the floor, waking them up. And so I said, listen, if you lose by this, it only shows that you don't know what you're doing. And so we give them a 6-month mandatory suspension in that case. And that's just so they can get in a gym and get it figured out without trying to rush the process.
What is your personal, I mean, obviously you can't give a lot of personal thought because you are a state employee, but what is your thoughts about guys that are stepping in that cage and aren't at a gym, that aren't training, especially guys that have lost maybe a couple in a row, maybe got lucky once?
Sure. I don't understand it. I don't understand from their mentality, you know. Why, like, I could understand if you play basketball and you go in and lose a few times, right? But you're losing a fight, you're getting beat up. And I don't understand why someone would do that and not join a gym. And again, it's their right to do that. I personally don't understand it, and then I give them only so much rope before I cut them off.
I want to talk a little bit about judging. Judging is always a hot topic,
Sure.
especially when you have bad things. What is your guys' review process for judges? Do you guys kind of take a step back after an event and say, this person went 30-27 and everybody else had a 29-28 the other way?
Right.
I mean, is that something do you guys have a review process of your judges, and is that something that you work with other states, or is that just something that you decide on your own?
A lot of states have a meeting after with the referees and judges, and where the person in my job would call them out. Hey, your score was off. I don't do that because I don't feel like that gets to the root of the problem. You know, you put the guy on the spot in the meeting, and he's going to just make up some excuse, and you can't really argue with it. You know, it just embarrasses the judge. So, for me personally, if I get a score, there's always downtime in a fight. I'll just approach the judge and say, listen, tell me what you saw. And in some cases, they've convinced me that I was wrong. You know, like I was scored this fight, and positional dominance was happening by one fighter, but the other guy knocked him down. And they were right to give that round, that controversial fight-winning round, to the guy who scored the knockdown rather than the guy who just sat in like a mounted position. And I questioned him, and he said, the guy knocked him down. That's a significant damage. And I was like, you know what, you're right. So I apologize.
I mean, I think the hardest part that I have on that kind of things is when you have the ground game, you always think the guy on top is winning.
Sure.
But you might have a guy that's really good at jiu-jitsu on the bottom.
Absolutely.
That's working some sort of submission, working a triangle, things along those lines, that it may just look like he's getting laid on the entire round and not in control. How are things like that judged and determined? I mean, is that something, do you kind of go in knowing this guy is a jiu-jitsu guy and he might be trying to play from his back?
No, you can't take any of that into account. However, the judges that we have, I train them. I'm hard on them. I expect them to be experts in all fields of, you know, whether it's grappling or striking, and they are. They know what they're looking at. You know, yeah, the scores aren't always perfect, but these guys know what they're looking at, and they can interpret what's happening in the fight. They're not going in with a preconceived notion of like, oh, this guy's a world champion wrestler and this guy took him down, so he really scores points for that. No, each fight is two individuals that we don't take any kind of thought about.
Now, you guys have had some world championship boxing fights here. You guys have had some big MMA fights here. Nebraska is very much the commission is a sports commission. Obviously, you're an MMA guy, so it's kind of MMA first, boxing second. A lot of these other states that have big boxing commissions, you know, talking Florida, talking Texas, talking those that are, they see things very differently as far as the viewpoint. And I can always tell when you're coming from a boxing commission place because they have inspectors walk out to the cage with the fighters.
Sure.
I guess tell me a little bit about the difference between the idea of being a boxing first commission and then just have MMA underneath you, and being a sporting commission. And I know that this gets in a little bit of gray area because you've got to play friendly with other people, but tell me a little bit about that, kind of the difficulties that some of these places that are focused on boxing and just trying to take care of MMA underneath it do.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, it has nothing to do with me personally about we have more MMA than boxing. That's just what's here. You know what I mean? That's what the people are buying tickets to see, the promoters are wanting to do. So, yeah, I don't know. For me, luckily, that's the case here because my background is mixed martial arts, but I've had to learn more about boxing as I've had the job. But I don't know. I feel like boxing is bigger in many more states than MMA. I think we're maybe like a wrestling Midwest kind of community where MMA is more popular. Of course, we have a world champion here in Nebraska and a world championship gym that he trains and still remains here in Nebraska, but we don't have a lot of boxing events. And I don't know. I guess that doesn't answer your question. Sorry.
No, I guess the difference, I mean, really the difference is, what is the difference between a boxing commission versus a sporting commission?
I think, so boxing is very concerned about hand wraps because it is a huge deal. That's all you can do in boxing. You know, you put those under the glove. Where in MMA you can hit with a bare elbow, and I don't think that you're going to wrap your hands up so tight that you can't even open it to grapple, when you can still hit it with your elbow or knee. That's going to be way harder than some kind of wrap. So I think the wraps are a big deal for boxing commissions. I think inspectors with the fighters at all time is a good thing. I think that's a good thing. I don't have the manpower to do it, so it's a little bit less of a regulatory position that way. But I think that's good. If I had an unlimited budget, I would have unlimited inspectors. But you know, we're a small state, and according to events. You know,
do you treat boxing events differently than MMA events?
I wouldn't say I treat them any different. I'm a little less confident, I'll admit, like especially when it's a big televised world title fight where, you know, I get a little nervous because I don't have the experience. You know, we only do one or two a year, and then one of the two is, you know, this world championship fight. So I'm a little nervous, but I've got a lot of people to help me. If it's a big boxing show, the sanctioning body's there. This guy's done countless world title fights. That's his job, is to award titles. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I've got the support there, and I feel like I don't need the support in the MMA side. So it's a little different for me, but I have the people that I need.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, recently we just had legislature come through to bring in bare knuckle, which you guys have sanctioned 3 events for now?
4, I think 4.
4 events, and professional kickboxing.
Yeah.
And obviously the kickboxing thing's a little bit of a snafu that we didn't, the legislation wasn't caught going through. Tell me a little bit about the process of that and kind of what separates one sport from another and what you can sanction and what you can't. Because I know that you want to be able to do kickboxing or wanted to be able to do Muay Thai.
Yeah.
And for one reason or another, it just hasn't been something that's been able to happen.
Yeah. So, for Muay Thai specifically, we can do that, but only professionals. And there's not a lot of professionals that do that. And I think, if you're a legislator, you're thinking of this from a different point of view, and you're thinking, if I'm going to go in there and do kickboxing, if I'm going to go in there and do bare knuckle fighting, I want to get paid, right? I shouldn't. But the market is actually a lot larger for amateurs, and especially in the kickboxing world. Now, I don't know that I would want to go do a bare knuckle fight and not get paid, but who knows? If I would if it was a tryout for a big money fight, you know what I mean? So there is a role for amateur combat sports in every sport, and I would support that in any time.
So what is the process of adding in a new sport? So say somebody wanted to come in and do, I don't know.
Yeah.
Whatever. They want to come in and do K2 rules kickboxing, which isn't something that you guys sanction at this point. Right. What is the process of them being able to make that happen?
So they need to contact a senator or legislator and have them draft up a bill. And almost always, the only thing that they'll call me and ask me, what's the financial impact of this on my office? That's it. That's all they'll ask. And of course, adding more sports is, there might be a cost. I have to train some referees and judges for this sport specifically. But that's it. That's my only cost. And then however many events they think they're going to add forever is my benefit.
So I guess one question I have here is, and this I actually don't know the answer coming into this, is so when I go to Minnesota and we do Muay Thai there, it's not sanctioned by the state, it's sanctioned by ISKA out of Des Moines.
Okay.
Is that something that the state of Nebraska, that a promoter in the state of Nebraska could do, or does every combat sport they have to do here, does it have to be sanctioned by the state?
I believe it needs to be sanctioned here by the state. I'm not an attorney, I don't know that, but I believe that it needs to be sanctioned, and that's the reason that we don't have amateur kickboxing, which we should. a sanctioning body is the role of a sanctioning body is to rank and award championships. That's really their only role. So I know that some act as a little bit of a regulator in some cases when there isn't there, but that's their role, is championship stuff only.
Okay. Tell me a little about your role in referees. You know, how are referees trained and decided on? How are judges trained and decided on? I mean, you've talked a lot about that. You do a lot of training with them, but how do you determine somebody is qualified to do that job?
So really, to get in, they come and take a course. It's only 1 day course. Referees is 1 day, judges 1 day. You know, we bring in a trainer. Then they have to pass a test. And I always review the test. I make sure that it's difficult. You know, you would have to know, you at least have to know what you're looking at to pass the test. Then they're applicants, right? They're ready to train, to work, really. And I'll start them off in a show. I usually try to start them off in the lower amateurs, you know, like I even, let's say if a guy's a new referee, I know he's a judge already, I might assign him as a judge and give him 2 fights on the card and just watch him and see how he's doing. And then, honestly, the rest of it, the more often that you see the guys is really just my opinion. It comes down to availability, of course, but it's really just the guys I think are doing the best. You'll see them do the higher level fights. The guys that I think are doing the worst, you'll see them get some experience in the lower level fights. Physical training, I won't say that we do that. You know, some people come to the same gym that I go to. A couple referees go there, but you know, that doesn't give that, you know, every gym is just as good as my gym. So if I know they're in a gym, I think that's important. Then they tell me if they have a conflict, you know, like this guy trains at my gym, like he's fighting. And that's why we have 2 referees, you know, 3 judges, so.
Man, that's really all I got for you. I mean, is there anything I'm missing as far as what the commissioning, the sanctioning body does in the sport of MMA that people may not understand or may not know that you would like to be able to get out there?
I don't think so. I mean, you know, when I fought, there was no commission regulation. And while I saw it as a benefit, you know, I fought without getting blood work results from my opponent. I fought without any kind of insurance. I fought without getting suspended when I was hurt. And I mean, I took fights, you know, like 2 weekends in a row where I got hurt the first time. And then I shouldn't have fought. But I committed myself to them, and you know, and now you couldn't even make that. You couldn't even match that fight, you know. And so, looking back, while I didn't wish it at the time, I could see the benefit of it, and that's why I